Darkness.
Vile.
Tragic.
Hopeless.
Despair.
Terror.
Atrocious.
Anguish.
Guilt.
My own personal nightmare. Remembering the life-altering experience from a distance. In a world that seeks to regard man as man.
Forgiveness. Is it mine to give?
I am a concentration camp survivor. I endured torment and despair at the hands of others.
At a time when apathy made existence easier, I faced one of the hardest obstacles of life.
My name is Sarah, and I remember. No words can give justice to the injustice. So I, Sarah in the physical form, listen.
But no mind can ever fully rest, so I, the inner mind of Sarah, am full of thought.
Together, we represent one Sarah. I, Sarah in the physical flesh.
And I, Sarah's inner mind, conscience, and thought process.
I will always remember.
I'm dying, aren't I? I cannot live like this. The pain, the suffering, it is all too much. I cannot live with this.
What can I do to make you more comfortable?
I shall die, but I am too young to die. Yet I'm eager for the comfort of death's embrace. I've done terrible things, committed horrible sins. I seek forgiveness. I need to confess to a Jew. Please.
While waiting for the order to fall on at roll call in camp, the corporal randomly came over to a group of us and counted off 50. We were formed up in threes and marched through the gate.
Get moving.
As we walked, I couldn't help but notice a military cemetery to the left of the street. The graves were aligned in stiff rows, and on each grave there was planted a sunflower. The flower heads seemed to absorb the sun's rays like mirrors and bring them down into the darkness. Butterflies fluttered from flower to flower, carrying messages from grave to grave. Suddenly, I envied the dead soldiers. Each had a sunflower to connect him to the living world, and butterflies to visit his grave. For me, there would be no sunflower. I would be buried in a mass grave. No sunflower would ever bring light into my darkness, and no butterflies would dance above my dreadful tomb.
Where are we going?
Perhaps they are setting up some new orchards for us.
Come on, swine, get moving.
Going means to carry out with feet a decision the brain has formed. But in our case, our brains made no decisions. Our feet merely followed what the front man did. They stopped when he stopped. We halted in front of the technical high school. Above the door was a board inscribed Military Hospital. We were handed over to a sergeant of the medical corps who was assigning duties. While awaiting assignment, a nurse caught me by the arm.
Are you a Jew?
Why did she ask? Could she not tell from my clothing, my features? Was she trying to be insulting? A sympathetic soul, perhaps. I followed the Red Cross nurse into the building. She pushed me through an open door of a patient room. She bent over the bed and whispered something to a figure wrapped in white, lying motionless in the bed.
Stay here.
Please come on here. Talk loudly is exhausting. I have not much longer to live. I know the end is near.
I was unmoved by his words. The way I had been forced to exist in the prison camps had destroyed in me any feeling or fear about death. Sickness, suffering, and doom had been a constant companion of us Jews. Such things no longer frightened us.
I shall die, and there is no one left to help me, and no one to mourn my death. I know that thousands of men are dying. Death is everywhere. It is neither infrequent nor extraordinary. I am resigned to dying soon, but before I go, I want to talk about an experience which is torturing me. Otherwise, I cannot die in peace. My name is Carl. I'm 22. a volunteer in the SS, I must tell you something dreadful, inhuman. I must tell you because you're a Jew.
All of the atrocities and terrors that a sick brain can invent are familiar to me. I have felt them on my own body, and I have seen them happen. Anything this sick man has to tell me couldn't surpass the horror stories from camp.
Some time had elapsed before I realized what guilt I had incurred.
I stared at the bandaged head. I didn't know what this man wanted to confess, but I knew for sure that after his death, a sunflower would be planted on his grave. Already, a sunflower was turning towards the window through which the sun was sending its rays into this death chamber. But why was the sunflower already making its appearance? I envied him.
I was not born a murderer. I come from Stuttgart. My mother raised me as a Catholic. But that all ended when I joined the Hitler Youth. And when the war began, I volunteered, naturally in the SS. We were given literature about the Jews and Bolsheviks. We devoured the Stürmer. Our borders would be pushed further eastward. The German people needed where to live.
He was sorry for himself. His words better.
We were heroes. We made history. Day after day, we received victory reports, and constantly would the war be over soon. Hitler said so. One hot summer day, we came to Dnipropetrovsk. In a large town square stood a mass of people in a close guard. In my young life, I have never seen so many Jews. There were 150 of them, including many women and children. An order was given and we marched towards the Holy Mass. As we approached, I saw the expression in their eyes. Fear. Indescribable fear. Apparently they knew what was awaiting them. A truck rolled up full of cans of petrol, which we unloaded and took into the house. The strong men among the Jews were ordered to carry the cans into the upper stories. They obeyed, though apathetically, without a will of their own. Afterwards, we were given the order to begin to move the Jews into the house. It was not very large. I would have never guessed it possible to fit them onto it. But after a few minutes, there was no Jew left on the street.
He was silent, and my heart started to beat violently. I could well imagine the scene. I could hear the frantic cries.
Then another truck came up full of more Jews, and they too were moved into the house. The door was locked and a machine gun was post-ops.
I knew how this story would end. He could spare me the rest.
Please stay. I must tell you the rest.
Maybe it was something in his voice that prevented me from obeying my instinct to end this interview. Perhaps I wanted to hear from his own mouth, in his own words, the full horror of the Nazis' inhumanity.
We were told that everything was ready. We received the command to move the safety pins from our hand grenades. We stepped back a few yards and threw the grenades through the windows of the house. We stood by, rifles ready, as the flames ate their way from floor to floor. In the window of the second story was a man with a small child in his arms. His clothes were all light. Beside him stood a woman, doubtless the mother of the child. With his free hand, the man covered the child's eyes, and then he leapt into the streets. Seconds later, the mother followed. Then, from other burning windows fell more bodies. We shot. I can never forget, least of all, that small child with his black hair and dark eyes.
Up to this moment, my feeling towards the dying man had tended towards sympathy. Now, all of that was past. The touch of his hand caused me almost physical pain, and I drew away. I still didn't think of leaving. There was something more to come. His story must go on.
Perhaps they were already dead when they struck the street. It was frightful. Screams mixed with volleys of shots intended to drown out the shrieks. I can never forget.
I could see and hear everything as clearly as if I had been there. I heard the screams. I heard them praying for their children. I saw them leaping in the flames to the earth.
We were told that the massacre of the Jews was in revenge for Russian time bombs over that day, which had cost us 30 men. We killed 300 Jews in exchange.
What could this man still have to tell me? That he was not the only person who had murdered Jews? That he was simply a murderer among murderers?
In the following weeks, we advanced towards the Crimea. It wasn't going to be a walkover anymore. The fighting lasted weeks. At last, we received the order to attack. We charged out of the trenches. But suddenly I stopped. I saw the burning family. They came to meet me. No! I cannot shoot them a second time! And then I lost consciousness. When I awoke, I was in this hospital. I had been torn to shreds. It's a miracle I'm still alive. But I'm as good as dead.
His thoughts were once again centered on himself. He was torturing himself, determined to gloss over nothing. He groped for my hand, but I did not want to be touched by the hand of death. He sought my pity, but had he any right to pity?
Look, those Jews, they died quickly.
At this, I stood to go, I, the last Jew in his life. But he held me fast with his corpse-like hand. Where did he derive such strength?
When I was a boy, everything was easier. Perhaps if I still had some faith left, death would not be so difficult. This has to be my confession. But what sort of confession is this? A letter without an answer?
No doubt he was referring to my silence. But what could I say? Here was a dying man, a murderer who did not want to be a murderer, but who had been made into a murderer by a murderer's ideology. He was confessing his crime to a person that, perhaps tomorrow, must die at the hands of these same murderers. In his confession, there was true repentance.
And so I'm left here with my guilt. In the long hours while I've been awaiting death, I've longed to talk to a Jew and simply beg forgiveness. Only I didn't know if there were any Jews left. In my last hours, you are with me. I do not know who you are, but I know you are a Jew, and that is enough.
Here lay a man who wished to die in peace, but who could not, because the memory of his terrible crime gave him no rest.
By him sat a person also doomed to die, but who did not want to die because she yearned to see the end of all the horror that blighted the world.
Two people who had never known each other had been brought together for a few hours by fate. One asks the other for help,
But the other is just as helpless, and able to do nothing for him.
I stared at his folded hands.
Between them, there seemed to rest a sunflower.
Without a word, I left the room. On our way back to camp, we passed once again the military cemetery with its long lines of graves. But this time, the sunflowers looked different. They were facing in a new direction. The evening sunshine gave them a reddish tinge, and they trembled gently in the breeze. They seemed to be whispering to each other. Sunflowers are something to please the eye. But what are flowers to those rotting under the earth? Like them, the sunflowers will rot away.